Hello and welcome to Cyber Focus, your source for international business information. My name is Tim Smith and I'll be your host. Today, our guest is Dr. Timothy Fort. Dr. Fort holds the Everly Chair of Business Ethics at the Kelley School of Business at Indiana University. His primary research identity pertains to the issues of ethical corporate culture and the relationship between ethical business and sustainable peace. He has authored 5 major books, and his latest one, The Diplomat in the Corner Office, won the 2016 Best Book Award from the Academy of Management's Social Issues in Business section. He has written 3 textbooks on topics in business law and ethics, and is currently working on 3 more. Dr. Fort has received many research awards and has authored more than 70 academic articles, book chapters, and reviews. Today, Dr. Fort will give us his insights on how ethical corporate culture contributes to sustainable peace. Tim, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me. Can't think of any other place I'd rather be.
All right, well, excellent. That's great. Thank you very much. Well, could you maybe start with the obvious question, and you could explain perhaps a little bit more about what the term is, sustainable peace?
Sure. The idea of sustainable peace is a peace that is enduring, a peace that people want to maintain because it has a sense of fairness to all the people who are involved. To contrast it, the Roman historian Tacitus once said about Rome and its avariciousness and wanting to conquer everybody, that they created a desert and they called it peace. That's not the peace that we're talking about. That's not the kind of sustainable peace. I mean, you can create peace where there's no conflict, simply because you're hegemony, because you just can dominate everybody else. But that's really not what we're looking for. It's more along the lines of, to use another quote from Pope Paul VI, that you probably see on bumper stickers sometimes, that if you seek peace, work for justice. And that's more of the tie of what we're really, not to say that my book is all about bumper stickers, but that's really the kind of thing that we're looking at. Sustainable peace is really more about a just peace, a peace that the stakeholders and the involved feel is fair to all of them.
Would you use the term holistic?
I love that term, and I think that works very well.
Okay.
It's a holistic understanding of life and relationships, and so it fits very well.
Great, thanks. So what role can business play in achieving sustainable peace?
Well, I've divided business roles, or the things that they can do, in kind of 3 different ways. One is that they can contribute to economic development, because there's plenty of studies that show that there's lots of correlations between poverty and violence. So to the extent that business is actually promoting economic development, which it's kind of its mission anyway, they could be doing a good thing, as long as we're not talking about economic development through sweatshops, through colonialism or stuff like that.
Of course.
In addition, there are studies that show that one of the best predictors for civil war, these are done by Paul Collier, these studies, are when the main export product of a country is an undifferentiated commodity. Because then the whole game is who has control over that space. And so you'll do anything, including equipping a 6-year-old with a machine gun in order to defend that space. And so to the extent that businesses aren't just providing economic development, but diversifying the economy, they're doing something that moves the needle away from violence and toward peace. A second kind of a role, or a second type of thing that businesses can do, is to follow the law, rule of law, and particularly avoiding bribery. Lots of correlations between corruption and bribery. I don't do a lot of empirical studies myself, but one that I did do showed a clear correlation between corruption and violence, that those countries that are most corrupt sustain it through violence. Those that are the least corrupt decide disputes in a peaceful kind of a way. And then the third kind of a thing, or role that business can play, is what I call a sense of community. And in one sense, that's community citizenship, corporate citizenship, CSR. I think we understand that, being a good neighbor and being responsive to society. But actually, I think what's more interesting is how you structure the organization itself. Are you listening to your employees? Do they have a voice of what affects them? Do you have senses of gender equity? Are women treated the way that men are too? So there's equality. Lots of studies that show the more gender equity, the less violence. And so to the extent that you're respecting your rights within your organization, giving people voice, respecting gender equity, and putting people in sizes of organizations that I call mediating institutions, where they experience a consequence to their action. In a really big organization, it can feel your actions don't make a difference. But if you've got a group that you're working with on a regular basis, your actions do make a difference, and you can observe the consequences, and you have to live with the consequences, just like you have to live with your brother or sister. I mean, you got to figure out a way to get along, and so that's applicable to business as well. So those are the three kind of contributions or things that I think that businesses can do.
Okay, thank you. So what typology might you use to categorize business?
So in this last book that you mentioned in the introduction, I used a three-part typology. One is some companies are very social entrepreneurial these days. I mean, I look out at my students, MBAs and undergraduates, and some of them are coming into business to learn the business skills in order to promote a specific social good. And that's what whether it's environmental, whether it's gender, whether it's poverty. I mean, they do a lot. They want those business skills to promote something socially entrepreneurial. Well, there's some businesses that do that with respect to peace as well. And so some businesses systematically set out to try to create peace when they're doing good work. I'll give you a quick example. There was a company over in Northern Ireland that during the time of the Troubles intentionally hired half Catholics and half Protestants to get them to work together. And it was for the first time for most of them that they'd ever had to work together with that other. And so it has big consequences of that's a human being. It's not just someone that I throw a rock at or shoot a bullet at. And there are other examples too, but so there's some that do it that way. There are others that I call are very instrumental, and I use the term corporate foreign policy. I mean, the reality is that a lot of major multinational corporations are their own geopolitical entities. I mean, they're separate from U.S. or Germany. And the days when we could say, well, that's a German company or a Japanese company, sometimes that fits, but in a lot of ways it doesn't anymore. They're their own entity, and so they will strategically try to tack one way or the other of what's best for their business. Now, the other reality is that outside of the military-industrial complex, which is only 5 to 10% of the economy, most companies don't do well when there's bombs dropping on their buildings. And so most companies have a vested interest for their own financial benefit of actually promoting peace as opposed to violence. And those I call the corporate foreign policy of the instrumentalists. And then there's finally another group of company that frankly are my favorites, and that's the ones that may not have had any inclination that what they do has any impact on peace. They're just a good, solid, ethical company. And by doing what they are doing, they end up contributing to peace.
Okay. Thank you very much, Tim, for walking me through the different parts of all of the different ways companies contribute to peace. What actions can business take within its own organization to promote a strong culture of ethical decision-making?
So in a lot of ways, this is the flip side of the three contributions that businesses make, the be profitable and to follow the law and have a sense of community. And I use that for peace, but it comes out of my ethical studies. In fact, the story of how I got started on this is I was finishing a book, my first major book with Oxford University Press. It was on ethical corporate culture. And I just happened to be reading peace studies stuff. I find them interesting things. And I ran across some anthropological studies that were giving summaries of the attributes of relatively nonviolent societies. And what I noticed is that they were mapping really well with what I was talking about ethical culture. And that was the aha moment of, I wonder actually if this ethical stuff I'm talking about could have a peace impact. So my division within ethical culture is that to build an ethical culture, you have to have three kinds of trust. Every business understands that they need to have some degree of trustworthiness in order to be successful in business. They need to be trusted by their customers and their employees and even regulators. And so one kind of trust is complying with the law, doing what you're supposed to do. Because if you don't, you're going to get punished by a lawsuit or a regulation or something like that. So this is a kind of a trust that if you violate it, there's a coercive reaction to it. So obeying the law, which we saw earlier when we were talking about rule of law kinds of stuff. The second one is what I call that kind of trust hard trust, because there's a hardness to it, there's a coerciveness. The other is second one is called real trust. And that's where a company is trustworthy because it upholds its promises. It says what it's going to do. It tells the truth. It provides good quality goods and services and things like that. And there's a lot of literature out there that shows that if companies are honest with each other, they are even with their competitors, with their customers, that they end up with a good reputation. It ends up meaning that the studies show that there is some benefit economically by being a good business, ethical business. So that's the second kind. And then the third is what I call good trust, which is reaching or tapping into individuals' heart and souls to give them the freedom to do ethical things. I really believe that, I think you have to keep an eye on people, don't get me wrong. I am a lawyer, I put my lawyer's hat on. I think that you need to have laws and rules in the organization. But I think people really want to do good too. And they're proud of doing good. And they want to go home at night and not just look at their significant other over the dinner table and say, guess what, I complied with the antitrust laws. I mean, that's not really what they're going to talk about. They want to talk about something that they're really proud of, where they have impacted another person. And I think that there are ways, and I've talked about this in a lot of different areas, ways that you can tap into that individual's desire to do good through small organizations so they can see the impact of their actions. But one way is if they know that their actions may have a bigger payoff than what they might expect, then they might take ethics more seriously. Peace is one of those. So is the environment. I mean, ask yourself, why would anybody recycle anything? It's just one bottle. It doesn't make a difference. But we know that it does. And we know that those one actions do make a difference. And I think the same is true with peace. That if ethical behavior can pay off with peace, and we get that message out, it may be a reason why people might take their ethical behavior even more seriously.
Let's hope so.
Agreed, very much agreed.
There's some who are perhaps more cynical about businesses' role in the peace process. How can businesses respond to their skepticism?
It's inevitable. It is. I mean, when I first started this research, 20 years ago or so, people looked at me like I was either a leftovers, hippie radical, and I'm a little bit too young for that, not quite, but close, but not quite, or a contestant for a beauty pageant or something like that. I want world peace or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of skepticism out there. Businesses are viewed as being the bad guys. I mean, even if you look at children's movies, who's always the bad guy in a children's movie? It's always the greedy business person. Always. I mean, I watch this with my kids. It's the same thing, a storyline over and over. So it is inevitable. And the only way that you do it is just one at a time, proving people wrong. And unfortunately, it means that sometimes those cynical attitudes will be proven right. I mean, there are some bad stuff out there. That's why they hired me to be a business ethicist, because there are problems that are out there. But I do think that there's a lot of good things that businesses do, and you just have to one at a time demonstrate that no, we're serious about trying to do good. We believe in doing good. We believe it pays off, but we sincerely believe that it's a good thing to do, whether it pays off or not. Actually, the book that I'm working on right now is called The Sincerity Edge, and what with my co-author. That's our argument, that there may be a payoff when you do good ethical behavior, but there's a bigger payoff when you're doing it for sincere reasons, as opposed to just it's going to make you more money. And businesses the only way to do it is just one at a time, just sincerely try to put themselves out there to blend both ethics and business.
Tim, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing
pleasure.
all those great ideas with us today. And let's hope that the measurement and evaluation that you've done and continue to do in this area only helps it move along at a faster pace.
Let's hope so.
Let's hope so.
Right.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
That's all the time we have for this edition of Cyber Focus. Thank you for tuning in. If you have any comments or suggestions for future topics, please let us know at CIBER, that's CIBER, @indiana.edu.